Foundation here was done perfectly. Typically you don't get to say that, but you may notice underneath the high load foam, which we got underneath our plates, to break that thermal bridge, you're gonna find virtually no grout and no shims. That's because after concrete was poured, we went around with the transit and went around with the laser level and found at most an 1/8 out of level. It wasn't even that. I couldn't even find an 1/8 out of level. So the concrete pour took about a day. The next day they come back and they strip the forms, and it took them about 2 days to strip and fully remove all the forms out of the job, which is a little bit longer than usual, but a lot of that has to do with the H-clips and the 2x8s on the tops. There's a little bit more work, a little bit more material for them to strip out. And then we moved on to damp proofing, which in this case was a sprayed applied membrane along with a dimpled board, drainage board attached on. We had a crane on site to actually install the steel beam. Steel beams typically one of your first things that you're gonna have to do long before framing. Steel beam will be placed into a pocket to make sure you get your full bearing. That will be spec'd by your engineer. And you'll use steel shims to shim it up to make it perfectly level. With steel beams, you're gonna run your steel beams flush to the top of the concrete. Then 2x material lumber will be nailed on top of it to make it flush with your sill plates. So just a little bit of math involved, especially here with the 2-inch high load foam we got. You gotta account for that in your beam pocket. So my steel was actually flush with the top of my foam, and then the plates all run level with each other after that. Once the steel is installed with the steel shims, it's going to be grouted into place. So non-shrink grout will be formed and poured around the whole steel and formed up in a way that we know we have full bearing along that whole steel section. Typical steel beam bearing would be about 3.5 inches. Sometimes it's pushed to 4.5. But that'll be spec'd by your engineer in your drawings when they do their load calculation on the steel. So wall framing's going up now on the first floor. Going for 9-foot ceilings again on the main floor. So 104 5/8 studs with some standard 2x6 framing. Nothing too complicated on this job. We're actually going with an exterior mounted air barrier that's going to be directly on the OSB sheathing. It's a roll-on applied by the stucco contractor. We've gone for some pretty conventional framing on this job. It's just a standard 2x6 wall, 16 inches on center, 7/16 OSB on the outside. The OSB on the outside is actually where the air barrier is going to be applied on this job. The OSB is taped and sealed, and then a fluid applied air barrier is applied to it to gain our air sealing. Which makes it pretty easy to work. Not too many air barriers in and out of the house. Air barrier will be tied into the 2-inch XPS foam underneath the plate, which then allows that to run inside the house, and then it's tied to XPS foam on the inside of the house, which keeps our air barrier all consistent. And then on the inside, we still need to run a vapor barrier. So we'll just be using a Certainty Smart Membrane, which is a slight permeability vapor barrier, or one-way perm vapor barrier, which just keeps us from having any risk of having that double vapor barrier, which you want to avoid as much as possible, or at all costs. Hey, this is Darcy from The Conscious Builder. If you want to check out our net zero build, check the link in the description and subscribe to this channel to keep up to date on our weekly videos.